Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Robert Wadlow. Starting off with the man who is recognized as being one of the, if not the tallest man ever. Robert was born on February 22nd, 1918, and although he was an average size at birth, by age 5 he was already 5'4". That is almost my height. Imagine an actual toddler walking around the size of a grown man. New definition to the terrible twos. By 17 years old, he was standing at 8'1", making him one of the, if not the tallest teenager ever, but he certainly was the tallest man in the end as he grew to be 8'11". His huge appetite had him consuming 8,000 calories a day, but being this tall isn't all glitz and glamour, and it can come with some serious side effects. He had trouble walking because of his fast growth, and this required him to have braces on his legs as well as to use a walking stick. Unfortunately, an ill-fitted brace would eventually lead to his very untimely death. In 1940, Robert received a new leg brace that didn't fit properly, and just 1 week later this brace caused a blister. Seems like a minor inconvenience, but this blister went on to become really infected. This infection very sadly went on to take Robert's life at the very early age of just 22 years old. In our number 9 spot today we have the Ancient Giant. Back in 1991, researchers were excavating a necropolis in Fidenæ, which in ancient times would have been a territory that was indirectly managed by Rome. During this excavation, experts came across a tomb that was abnormally long, and after examination they too learned that the bones were also unusual. This discovery would later go on to become the first complete ancient skeleton of a person with gigantism. Measured to be 6'8", this person would have been a giant in the 3rd century AD in Rome, where the average man stood about 5.5 feet tall. This team was able to confirm this gigantism diagnosis when they found the skull, although they were pretty certain beforehand due to the size difference seen in this set of bones compared to the average bones from the time period. Although this discovery is an incredible one, we still know very little about what life would have been like for a giant in ancient Rome. In our number 8 spot today we have John Rogan. John is the second tallest man known in history. Born in 1867, John grew to be 8 foot 9.5 inches, which is second only to Robert Wadlow, who we already talked about. John was born in Tennessee and was the 4th of 12 children. He grew extremely rapidly, and unfortunately this led to ankylosis, which causes abnormal rigidity in the skeletal joints. By 1882, this sadly left John unable to walk or stand. John was still able to make a living despite this mobility issue, and to do this he sold portraits and postcards at the train station. Many offers came his way to perform in the circus and side shows, but John declined them all. It is said that John used a goat pull cart as a wheelchair, and that everywhere he went he was the center of attention, not only for his height, but because he just had a big and lovely personality. There is a record stating that John's maternal grandfather was also a giant, requiring a larger saddle when riding a horse, so it is thought that perhaps there might have been some genetics at play here. John lived until 1905, and in that year he passed away on September 12th. In our number 7 spot today we have Anna Haining Bates. Anna was born in Nova Scotia in August of 1846, and by the time she was 22 years old she was already standing at a height of 7'6". At age 16, Anna went into show business because it was very clear she was taller than the average female. She began touring around, and in 1965 had a frightening moment at Barnum's Museum when it caught fire and she was too tall to escape through a window. She thought she'd met her end because the stairs were on fire, but thankfully she was saved when employees broke the wall down and she was lifted out with a crane. In 1871, Anna met another super tall person named Martin Van Buren Bates, who was also known as the Kentucky Giant and who was 7'8". The pair got married and were often exhibited at circuses as the tallest married couple in the world. Anna ended up passing away in 1888 at the age of 41. In our number 6 spot today we have Don Kohler. Don is a man who was born in the United States in 1925 and he lived until 1981. Don is another one of the few people who can be added to the list of humans who were able to reach over 8 feet tall, as it is recorded that Don grew to be 8'2". Don and his twin sister were born to parents who were slightly above average height. His mother was 5'10" and his father was 6'2", but Don was the only one in the family at the time who reached these record-holding heights. Don's twin twin sister grew to be 5'9", which means that there was a distance of 2 feet and 5 inches between them, which is a record recognized by Guinness. Don explained that the most difficult piece of clothing to find to fit his size was socks, and thankfully later in his life a hosiery company in Pennsylvania started custom making him socks. How nice is that? Later in his life, Dan would unfortunately suffer from kyphosis, which resulted in some severe curvature of the spine. At 55 years old, Don passed away from a heart condition, and as per his wishes, he was cremated and then had his ashes spread on Lake Wisconsin, where he just loved to fish. In our number 5 spot today, we have the biblical giants. There are tons of mentions of giants in the Bible, with the most famous probably being Goliath. Samuel 17:1-58 says, quote, "And there came out of the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze." There is even the mention of the Amorites, a race of giants, 80 different times. People who study the Bible estimate that the heights of these guys would have been somewhere from 60 to 30 feet, but some mentions claim that the giants were as tall as cedars, which could make them somewhere from 50 to 100 feet tall. Either way, it's safe to say that they were towering and they were terrifying. In our number 4 spot today, we have Joseph Edward Beaupre. Joseph is a man who was actually born in my home province of Saskatchewan in 1881, so imagine my shock when I realized that I had never heard of him before. Joseph's parents were average height, so of course they were surprised when, by age 9, their son had already outgrown them. At the age of 17, he stood 7'1" and is said to have been able to lift an 800-pound horse. By the time 1904 rolled around, Joseph was 8'3", and he tried to become a cowboy but realized this probably wasn't the career for him, considering his feet touched the ground while riding a horse. At 21, he joined the circus, but as one can imagine, this took quite the toll on him, and it's said he was also dealing with tuberculosis at the time, which is just crazy. Sadly, the story takes quite a dark turn, as at age 23, after a performance and after coughing up blood, Joseph went unconscious and never woke up again. The circus refused to pay his burial expenses, and his father was unfortunately too poor to afford it, which meant that his body remained with the undertakers, who began displaying it in store windows and museums, which is just horrifying to think about. Joseph's body would remain with people who never should have had it in the first place until 1989, over 80 years after his death, until it was finally released to his surviving family members, who then cremated it. In our number 3 spot today, we have Patrick Cotter O'Brien. Patrick was born in Ireland in January of 1760, and he grew to be 8'1", which made him one of the first people to be known to grow past 8 feet tall. At 18 years old, he began working as a bricklayer because he didn't need a ladder to reach the top of the cottages like the rest of those he worked with. Like many people on this list, Patrick found himself in a life of show business where he called himself just O'Brien. It is said that he had to travel around in a carriage that was made specifically for him because of his size, and one day when his carriage was stopped by a highwayman, when this guy saw Patrick, he fled because he was terrified of him. Sadly, Patrick's size took quite a toll on his body and eventually led to his death, which occurred on September 8th, 1806, when Patrick was 46 years old. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Giant of Castleknock. A little different from most of the people on this list, the Giant of Castleknock is a term used to refer to 3 bone fragments, a humerus, tibia, and femoral midshaft that were discovered by a French anthropologist in 1890. He found these bones in the sediment used to cover a Bronze Age burial tumulus that some think might even date back to the Neolithic. If his measurements and estimate are correct, whoever these bones belonged to would have been the largest human to be known to have existed. This is because, based on the bone size, he has estimated this person to have been 11'6". Of course, without the rest of the bones, this is hard to confirm for sure, and it's important to note that there hasn't been a modern review done on these bones just yet. Perhaps it's something worth pursuing, however, especially if it means we could confirm the existence of a human who was 11 feet tall. Alright, that's pretty insane. Record breaking. Give the man a Guinness. In our number 1 spot today, we have Sandy Allen. Sandy lived in Shelbyville, Indiana, and her life spanned from 1955 until 2008. During her life, she was recognized by the Guinness World Records as the tallest woman in the world. She was recorded as being 7 feet 7 inches tall, and her height was a result of the fact that she had a tumor on her pituitary gland that caused it to release growth hormone uncontrollably, like somewhere between 200 and 1,000 times more than usual. In 1977, when she was 22 years old, she underwent surgery for her condition, because if she hadn't, she would have just continued to grow and grow. Throughout her life, Sandy appeared on TV, in documentaries, and even had a song written about her. Later in life, unfortunately, Sandy found herself having to use a wheelchair because her legs and back were unable to support her tall stature. While she passed away in 2008, in 2020 her friend and manager John Kleeman donated a collection of her memorabilia to Ripley's museums.
Number 10. The Journals. In 1520, Ferdinand Magellan took time out of his busy schedule of sailing around the world to stop in what is now Patagonia, where he found a naked giant dancing and singing on the shore. Magellan ordered one of his men to make contact and to make sure to reciprocate the dancing and singing to demonstrate friendship. It worked. The man was able to lead the giant to a small island offshore where the great captain waited. Describing the scene was a scholar along for the journey, Antonio Pigafetta, who kept a diary of the journey, and that was later turned into a book. When he was before us, he began to marvel and to be afraid, and he raised one finger upward, believing that we came from heaven. And he was so tall that the tallest of us only came up to his waist and had a big booming voice. On that small island, Magellan and his men gave the giant food and drink, then made the mistake of showing him a mirror, wherein the giant, seeing himself, was greatly terrified, wrote Pigafetta, leaping back so that he threw 4 of our men to the ground. But once things had calmed down, the explorers proceeded to make contact with the rest of the tribe, hunting with them and even building a house to store the provisions while on shore. Number 9. Giant in Mexico. In December 2022, TikTok user Squatch Watch Project, who claims to be connecting the cryptid community, posted a video of what they claim is a giant. The text on the video reads, "Real giant caught on video in Mexico." The video shows what appears to be some sort of mountain or cave. There is a hole in the side of it, and there's a very large man looking out. He seems to be staring at the person recording and then backs up and goes back into the rocks. Many people in the comments made jokes, but a lot of them think it's real. One user commented, "What's going to be the government's excuse for this one? The video and the zoom on this is on point." Others are commenting that it's like the film The Hills Have Eyes. Now, is it a giant, a feral human being? Who knows, but whatever it is, I will be staying far away. Number 8. Giant complex. In 2012, a team of explorers and researchers discovered what they believed to be an ancient pyramid complex in the remote area of the Ecuador Amazonian jungle, one not known to the general public, internationally, or even within the county. Bruce Fenton, author and researcher, believes the complex may be the lost city of the giants, so named for the large giant-sized tools that were found in the vicinity, as well as the local legends that speak of a race of giant humans who once inhabited the region. At the discovery site, there was one extremely large pyramidal type structure of approximately 80 meters square base and 80 meters height with steeply inclined walls. This structure is made up of hundreds of large stone blocks weighing approximately 2 tons in weight. The large hill has a flat area at the top where many artifacts have been found. It looks like a paved wall, an ancient street or plaza with a 60-degree angle, perhaps the roof of a larger structure. Many of the stones were perfectly aligned, have sharp edges, and seem to have been sculpted by human hands, said Mr. Giovanni, who undertook an expedition to the site in April and May of 2013. Number 7. The skull. A team of international researchers studying an ancient skull determined it belongs to a newly discovered species that's more closely related to modern humans than Neanderthals, but others in the scientific community say the skull might belong to a mysterious but already known ancestor. The researcher study, published in the journal Innovation, said the skull came from a previously undiscovered human species that lived in northern China. Researchers have named the species Homo longi, which translates to dragon man. The skull is the largest Homo skull ever found, and the researchers say it belonged to a male in his 50s who lived in northern China between 146,000 and 296,000 years ago. The skull shows a face that would have been much larger than modern humans, with thick brow ridges and deeply set eyes, but shows a brain that would have been about the same size. The skull was reportedly found by a farmer in the northern Chinese city of Harbin during the early 1930s while he worked on a labor crew that was building a bridge. Bridge. In 2018, it was given to a Beijing area university. Now, if the skull does belong to a new species, it's largely unclear what their lives looked like. It's also unclear how much they might contribute to the lineage of modern human. The DNA evidence suggests that if the hominin sees another hominin, they're happy to interbreed, even if their brow ridge is a little bigger or their skull is a little higher, said Karen Babb, a Midwestern University anthropologist who was not associated with the research. Number 6. Mysterious silhouette. In December 2022, a TikToker named MixMasterXL posted a video of a giant on a mountaintop in Mexico. They captioned the video 40-foot giant caught on camera walking the mountaintops in Mexico. Now, I don't think it's 40 feet tall, that's an exaggeration, but it's something giant up there. It's a tall black silhouette that's walking, you can see their legs as they take steps, and both of their arms. Now, if this was a normal sized human, you wouldn't be able to see them that clear or that much. It's clearly something large looking down below from the mountain. Now, the comments were mixed, with a lot of people thinking it was fake, but if it wasn't a giant, then what was it? Number 5. Ancient burial mounds. There is very credible documented evidence that giant skeletons were found across America in the late 1800s. In New England, skeletons unearthed in an ancient burial mound were measured between 7 feet and 10 feet tall. While respected newspapers reported these findings at the time, which points to the credibility of their source. In fact, there are several documented findings of giant skeletons from all over America in the past, with most reports coming from the turn of the 19th century. There is also evidence that bones of giants measuring over 2 meters in height were found in the tombs across Sardinia. This was covered in an episode of Forbidden History called The Mystery of the Giants. There are some reports suggesting that during the 19th century, the Smithsonian Museum in America was very keen to purchase the bones of giants found by civilians, only for them to never see the light again. There is a similar story in Sardinia, with farmers in more modern times uncovering massive bones and teeth and handing them over to the authorities, only to hear nothing more about them. Number 4. Bone fragments. Giant of Castelnau refers to 3 bone fragments, a humerus, tibia, and femoral midshaft, discovered by Georges Vacher de Leponge in 1890. According to de Leponge, the fossil bones may have belonged to one of the largest humans known to have existed. He estimated from the bone size that the human may have been about 11 feet 6 inches tall. His findings were published in the journal La Nature in 1890. The bones were dated to the Neolithic period, since they were found at the very bottom of the Bronze Age burial tumulus. Writing in the journal La Nature, de Leponge describes the bones in detail. I think it's unnecessary to note that these bones are undeniably human, despite their enormous size. The first is the middle part of the shaft of a femur, 14 centimeters in length, and the circumference of the bone is 16 centimeters. The second piece is a middle and upper part of the shaft of a tibia. The circumference is 13 centimeters, and the length of the fragment is 26 centimeters. The third, very singular, was regarded as the lower part of the humerus. The volumes of the bones were more than double the normal pieces to which they correspond. Judging by the usual intervals of anatomical points, they also involve lengths almost double. The bones of the giant were studied at the University of Montpellier and examined by M. Sabater, professor of zoology, and M. Delage, a professor of paleontology. In 1892, the bones were studied carefully by Dr. Paul-Louis André Kiener, professor of pelagical anatomy at Montpellier School of Medicine, for which he admitted they represented a very tall race, but nevertheless found them abnormal in dimensions and apparently of morbid growth. Number 3. On a mountain. In November 2022, a TikTok user named Painting with Lizards posted a video of a giant on a mountaintop in Mexico. Yes, Mexico again. They claim that they post all kinds of creepy content. Their video has the text "giant spotted on the hills of Mexico. Is this the legendary Nephilim?" The video shows the side of a hill with many houses. On top of the hill, there appears to be a giant walking around. This being seems huge, too big to be a normal human being. A commenter said, "The fact that you can see it clearly from right there, no normal human can be seen like that. That monster has to be at least 20 feet tall." Now, this is the 3rd time a giant has been spotted in Mexico, and I'm honestly starting to believe it. All 3 sightings were in different areas, which to me makes it seem more believable. Do you think there's a giant in Mexico? Let me know in the comments down below. Number 2. North America. Over 1,000 accounts of 7-foot and taller skeletons have reportedly been unearthed from ancient burial sites over a 200-year period in North America. Newspaper accounts, towns and county histories, letters, scientific journals, diaries, photos, and Smithsonian ethnology reports have carefully documented this. These skeletons have been reported from coast to coast with strange atomic anomalies such as double rows of teeth, jawbones so large as to fit over the face of the finder, and elongated skulls, documented in virtually every state. Smithsonian scientists identified at least 17 skeletons that stood over 7 feet in their annual reports, including one example that was 8 feet tall, and a skull with a 36-inch circumference reported from Anna, Illinois in the Smithsonian Annual Report of 1873. Now, an average human skull is about 20 inches in circumference for reference. The Smithsonian Institution is mentioned dozen more times as the recipient of enormous skeletons from across the entire United States. And coming in at number 1 is the giant in Canada. Okay, so this isn't a jungle, but TikToker Andrew Dawson posted a video of a giant in May 2022 sitting on top of a mountain in Canada. He zooms into a mountain and there you can see a large person. Andrew calls it a giant, and I agree with him because there's no way that that is a human. It wouldn't be that big. After his post, he reported having interactions with the CIA and Canadian CSIS, as well as claims to being stalked after the post. He also uploaded a post entitled "I'm Scared," where he informed viewers that they might not see him post ever again, but that everything was true. He then posted another TikTok of what appears to be military vehicles on top of the mountain where he saw the giant, which is just suspicious. Since that post, Andrew has not been seen on TikTok or any other form of social media, sparking plenty of theories about his whereabouts. His videos have gained millions of views, but suddenly the comments were turned off. Now, with this being TikTok, things have gotten pretty wacky, but it seems that the full story may never be told. Andrew's obituary was actually posted, indicating that he passed away, leaving family members behind, but did he fake his death? Was it a setup? His video seems so real, but his behavior with everything was frightening. Did the government do this to hide the fact that there are giants? Who knows?
Alright, starting this off at number 10, we have Brahim Takiula. Now, he's actually joint 10th alongside a guy called Morteza, but I could only choose one to be at number 10, I'm afraid. So sorry, Morteza, you're still pretty tall though. Born in 1982, Brahim is from Morocco and stands at 8'1". He underwent treatment in Paris in 2006 to help treat the tumour that was causing his unstoppable growth. Now, thankfully, it worked, and the growth hormones in his blood returned to a normal level. Despite this though, Brahim is still famous for apparently having the largest feet on the planet at 15 inches, and he actually has specially designed shoes to help support his weight. Alright, next up for number 9 now, we have Bernard Coyne. Now, he was born in 1897 in Iowa, and when he was conscripted into the US Army during World War I, he was measured at being 8'2" tall. Bernard had something called daddy long leg syndrome, which involves his body totally ignoring the release of estrogen that's telling him to stop growing. Bernard died at the age of just 23 from a glandular disorder that left him with a hardening liver. At this point, some reports even put his height closer to 8'4". Alright, next up at number 8 we have Don Kohler. Born in 1925, Don was of normal height until he shot up at 10 years old and eventually reached 8'2" tall. Now, if any of you guys watching this remember the 1970s, you might remember Don as the tallest person in the world at that time. What's interesting about him is that he actually had a twin sister who didn't share his extraordinary height. She remained at 5'9" tall, which meant the two held a world record for the biggest difference in height between two twins at 29 inches. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Vikas Upal from India, who was born in 1986. Although he was never officially measured by Guinness World Records, there have been a number of other organisations that confirmed his height was 8'3", making him the tallest man in India. Over the years, there were a number of publications that put his height all the way up to 8'10", which would have put him at the number 2 spot on this list, but most people think that's a bit of an exaggeration. He had huge proportions. His hands were actually said to be 13 inches long, long and his feet 19 inches, but he did appear to be totally in proportion. Sadly though, Vikas died in 2007 after a failed brain tumor operation. Okay, for our number 6 now guys, we have Sultan Kösen. Born in 1982 in Turkey, Sultan is currently the tallest man in the world, standing at 8 foot and 3 inches. Here's a picture of him with the shortest man in the world at that time. Look at the difference. Like others on this list, he actually had a normal childhood until the age of 10, at which point he rocketed over 6 foot tall. His growth was caused by a tumor in his brain and it showed no signs of stopping into adulthood. In 2010, doctors attempted to remove the tumor by focusing radiation at it, and amazingly, it worked. It was a success. As of 2012, Sultan has officially stopped growing, but nobody seems to be taller than him yet. Alright, coming in at number 5 now, we have Edouard Beaupré. Born in 1881, Edouard is the tallest Canadian on this list and stood at 8 foot 3 inches tall. He was the oldest of 20 children, yes, 20. At age 9, he was 6 foot 1, that's the same height as me. But it wasn't just his height that made him remarkable, Edouard was also an impressive strongman. At the age of just 17, he reportedly lifted up an 800-pound horse. He also spoke French, English and 3 Native American languages. He spent the next 6 years touring with a circus before dying from a pituitary gland tumor at the age of 23. Alright, moving on to our number 4 now, we've got Väinö Mailarin. He was from Finland and was once the world's tallest living person. Interestingly, he was also the tallest soldier of all time as he was part of the Finnish Defence Forces. On multiple occasions throughout his 20s, he was measured at being 7 foot 3 inches tall, but interestingly, Väinö actually underwent a growth spurt in his late 30s and shot up over a foot to 8 foot 3 inches tall. Now if that wasn't impressive enough, he also apparently had huge hands that spanned the size of a bowling pin. What? Alright, coming in at number 3 now, we have John F. Carroll. This is an interesting one because John's case has been disputed over the years. He was born in 1932 and by age 27 he was measured at exactly 8 foot, but John had a severely disfigured spine, and without it, apparently he would have been 8 foot 7 3/4 inches. Born in Buffalo, New York, he became known as the Buffalo Giant after a growth spurt saw him grow 7 inches in just a few months. He was diagnosed with giantism, and although doctors tried to treat his spine condition, it did get worse, and John had actually shrunk 4 inches by the time he passed away at the age of 37. Okay, next up at number 2 now, we have John Rogan at 8 foot 9 inches. John was born in Tennessee in 1865 and was apparently a normal size up until the age of 13. Then he underwent a massive growth spurt that left him needing crutches to even stand up. By age 17, he couldn't walk at all. Unable to work for a living, John would stand at the train station and sell portraits of himself to curious tourists. He was said to always be friendly and easygoing. Although everybody knew he was probably the tallest man alive at that time, he wasn't officially measured until his death in 1905 and was buried under concrete to stop curious scientists from trying to study him. Alright, and finally, at number 1, we have the tallest human of all time, Robert Wadlow. Robert is the tallest confirmed living human of all time, standing at 8 foot and 11 inches, just 1 inch shy of 9 foot. His extraordinary height was caused by hypertrophy of the pituitary gland, which resulted in his body producing way too many growth hormones. Robert was born in Illinois in 1918. At the age of 5, he was already wearing clothes meant for 17-year-olds. The following year, he actually outgrew his own parents, and by the time he was 8 years old, he stood at 6 foot 2. That's actually an inch taller than I am now. Now sadly, Robert died due to an infection from a leg brace at the age of 22, and it took 12 pallbearers to carry his coffin.
Starting us off at number 10, we have Kazam, otherwise known as Shaquille O'Neal. For any of you who have seen that movie, man oh man, I rewatched it recently and I do not think it holds up. But if there are Kazam fans watching, please let me know what you think down in the comments. Anyway, back to Shaq. Shaquille O'Neal was born March 6, 1972, and little did his mother know she would be giving birth to one of the most famous basketball players of all time, as well as a modern giant. Shaq clocks in at 7 feet 1 inch, which is 2.16 meters in height, height and has quite the list of hilarious pictures comparing his size to other popular celebrities. One of my favorites is a picture of him with A-list comedian Kevin Hart. We all know Kevin is a shorter guy, but next to Shaq, he looks like a tiny villager. Luckily for Kevin, Shaq is just one large friendly giant unless he's on the court. Shaq no longer plays basketball, but is now a sports analyst on NBA-related TV shows, and even though nowadays he's usually seen just sitting at a desk, this man is still a giant. At number 9, we have Anna Haining Bates. Born in the Canadian province of Nova Scotia back in August of 1846, Anna was just like every other child until she started a bit of a growth spurt. A growth spurt that never ended. By age 5, she was already 4 feet 8 inches. That's 142 centimeters, and weighed over 100 pounds. That's over 45 kilograms. Finally, at age 22, she came in at 7 feet 6 inches. That's 229 centimeters and weighed 350 pounds, which is 159 kilograms. Bates went into show business around the age of 16 and would often be shown opposite to a little person to show the incredible difference in size. But being that tall has its disadvantages. In July of 1865, Anna almost burned to death during a fire at the famous P.T. Barnum Museum. The stairs were engulfed in flames and she was too tall to jump out the window. Luckily for her, she was saved by other museum employees who broke through walls to escort her out and was then assisted with a crane. That's crazy. It's hard enough sometimes getting emergency crews to the scene, let alone a crane. But hey, I'm guessing they didn't have the same kind of Toronto traffic as we do nowadays. Anna then later went on to marry another giant by the name of Martin Van Buren, aka the Kentucky Giant, who was 7 feet 3 inches tall. She later got pregnant with 2 children, but they both tragically died at birth. Anna herself later died in 1888 at the age of 41. At number 8, we're going back to the NBA with a basketball superstar, Yao Ming. This famous NBA superstar was born September 12, 1980 in Shanghai, China. Yao Ming's height is an incredible 7 feet 6 inches or 229 centimeters. This giant featherless being has a wingspan of 226 centimeters, which is basically just as tall as he is, and his feet are size 18. Those aren't shoes, those are frickin' water skis. Before coming to play for the NBA, he played for the Shanghai Sharks in the Chinese Basketball Association, and was then drafted to the NBA in 2002 to the Houston Rockets, where he there played until 2011. In February of 2017, Ming was elected as the chairman of the Chinese Basketball Association. Now, there is also a documentary titled The Year of Yao, filmed during his rookie year with the Rockets, as well as a book he co-wrote with NBA analyst Rick Butcher, titled Yao, A Life in Two Worlds. So if you want to get to know him a little bit more, check those out. If you want to see how this giant dominated the court, I'm sure you can find tons of old Rocket games all over the internet. At number 7, staying in China but going back to the 1840s, we have Chang Yu-sing. Sing grew up to be 7 feet 9 inches tall, which is 236 centimeters, and was appointed as a member of the emperor's court. Later on in his life, he left China for England on what was only supposed to be a brief visit, but that brief visit ended up turning out to be a 2-year stay. During his stay in England, many people would stop him and pay 3 shillings just to see him. Later on, taking advantage of the extra cash, he went on tour through the rest of Europe and was shown off alongside another little person just like Anna Haining Bates. He later also joined P.T. Barnum's circus and was also known to have many female admirers. By the sounds of it though, none of them lasted because I could not find any info on whether he was actually ever married. Maybe he just liked the bachelor life too much. I get it. Anyway, Chang Yu-sing later passed away in 1893 and his funeral was only attended by 50 of his closest friends due to his own wishes. His coffin was 8 feet 5 inches long, that's 260 centimeters, and I don't want to imagine what it was like being one of those pallbearers. If I was one of them, I probably would have let him down. At number 6, we have Patrick Cotter O'Brien. Patrick was born in Kinsale, Ireland on January 19, 1760. He grew up to be 8 feet 1 inch tall, which is 244 centimeters, and he was the first of 13 known people to grow past 244 centimeters. At the age of 18, he worked as a bricklayer. Needless to say, unlike the rest of his bricklaying colleagues, he did not need a ladder to reach the top of the cottages that they were working on. After he had enough of bricklaying, just like the most of the other giants on my list, he went into show business where he later went just by the name of O'Brien. He traveled around in a specially made carriage, and apparently he was once stopped by a highwayman who, when seeing the giant O'Brien inside, immediately ran away with his tail between his legs. His massive weight took quite the toll on his body, which brought him to his death on September 8, 1806 at the age of 46. I'm sure his weight caused him many troubles and struggles, but I bet it wasn't easy for the horses pulling him in the carriage either. That being said, the more horses, the easier it is to pull a 8-foot tall giant. giant. That's the old saying, right? Coming in at our halfway point at number 5, we have another Canadian, Joseph Edward Beaupre. Joseph was born in Willowbunch, Saskatchewan on January 9, 1881. His parents were what was considered average height, and honestly so was he until the age of 3, and he started growing like crazy. By the age of 9, he outgrew his own parents and he was 6.5 feet tall. At the age of 17, he was so big that it is reported that he lifted an 800-pound horse. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is, then that means he was not only tall, this guy was yoked too. He reached his full giant potential at the age of 23 at 8 feet 3 inches. That's 251 centimeters. He had to wear giant custom-made shoes that were size 22. If Yao Ming's shoes are water skis, then these are freaking snowboards for each foot. He had dreams of becoming a cowboy, but gave up because his feet would still touch the ground while atop his bucking bronco. He later joined a circus as well as hoping to capitalize on his size, but it took its toll on him, especially because he suffered from tuberculosis. He sadly died on July 3rd at the age of 23. Now, this story gets pretty sad. After his death, the circus refused to help his father pay for the burial, so his body stayed with the undertakers, who then started displaying his corpse in store windows and museums. In 1907, his corpse was found in an old circus hangar and was then given to Montreal University, where it is mummified and stored. In 1970, Ovilla Lesperance, descendant of Joseph, requested her relative's body back, but was at first denied because the university didn't want his body stolen and put up for display again. Finally, Ovilla got her relative's body back and Joseph was cremated in September of 1989, 85 years after his death. Even though his circus employers and maybe the Montreal University people are now deceased, I still have one thing to say to you. Screw you guys. At number 4, we have Arthur Caley. Arthur Caley was born in Sulby, Isle of Man in 1824 and was considered a normal-sized human being until his late teens when he started growing much taller. Maybe it was an after effect of puberty. He reached 7 feet 11 inches tall, which equals to 241 centimeters. He weighed over 392 pounds, which is 178 kilograms. His size earned him the name Manx Giant, and he was known to be a bit more wide than his other giant friends as well. He was frequently seen in exhibits in Manchester, London, and Paris before suddenly and mysteriously disappearing. His mother reported that he was dead, but many doubted this because his life had been insured for £2,000 only a few weeks prior. They believe it was a case of insurance fraud, and that a tree was actually buried in his place. Sure enough, Caley was not actually dead. He traveled also to join P.T. Barnum's circus, and he was known as Colonel Ruth Goshen, the Arabian Giant. His former life as the Manx Giant stayed a well-kept secret until his death in 1889. At number 3, we have Angus McCaskill. Angus was born on the island of Bernay in Scotland back in 1825. The Guinness World Record books recognize him as the tallest true giant to have ever lived because his height was not caused by any kind of growth abnormality. Funnily enough, he was so small at birth that doctors didn't believe that he would survive. Now, Angus only grew to 7 feet 9 inches or 236 centimeters, which may not seem like much after a few of our friends on the list here, but trust me when I say this guy was still absolutely massive. He had the biggest chest ever, coming in at 203 centimeters or 80 inches around. He weighed in at 500 pounds. That's 227 kilograms in case you wanted to know. Oh, and by the way, he could lift a 2,800 pound ship's anchor. He was also known to carry a 100 pound weight, which is 45 kilograms, for 10 minutes using only 2 fingers. Angus often received requests from people wanting to wrestle him. If those challengers didn't have the same size as Angus, they most certainly had guts. He then of course later joined the circus and toured through Cuba and the East Indies until going to Europe and North America. After retiring from the circus, he went into real estate and opened up his own store. Sadly, in 1863, he died from brain fever. Can you imagine rolling up to a house and seeing this guy out front? The outside is perfect and beautiful, but I don't know a damn clue what it looks like on the inside. Can you let me know? At number 2, we have Bernard Coyne, aka Bernard the Giant. Original name, huh? Bernard was born in Anthon, Iowa on July 27, 1897. His actual height is cause for dispute because some report him being 8 foot 2 inches, while others say he was 8 foot 4 inches, while even more people saying that he was 8 feet 8 inches. No matter what though, he was over 8 feet, which is over 240 centimeters tall. He was so tall that he was actually rejected by the army, probably because they could see him coming from miles away and that they were too scared that his rations would need to be 3 times the size of anyone else's. Unlike most other giant people whose height is a result of abnormalities in the pituitary gland, Bernard's height was from the unicoidal infantile gigantism, a very rare syndrome. His parents would put him on display for extra money when he was younger, but later decided against it because they didn't want to be on the receiving end of the wrath of God. Good idea, jerks. Bernard preferred a quiet life and turned down countless offers to go on exhibit ever again. His shoes were a size 24, which means they're considered something, I don't know, bigger than a snowboard, and he weighed in at 300 pounds, which is 136 kilograms. He sadly passed away at the age of 23. Man, being put on display for a couple of extra bucks by your parents. Too bad child services were not around yet. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, if you ever visited Clifton Hill on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls, you'll know this guy. Robert Wadlow. Robert was born on February 22nd, 1918 at a normal size. However, he quickly started growing at the age of 5 and he was already wearing clothes intended for teenagers. At age 8, he was taller than his 5'11" father and could even carry him up the stairs. He then joined the Boy Scouts at age 13 and had to have his own uniform, tent, and sleeping bag specially made for him. In 1936, he joined the Ringling Brothers Circus as a curiosity. He had a huge appetite and ate around 8,000 calories a day. In case you're wondering, the average human eats 2,000 to 2,400 calories a day. Damn, that guy can eat. He unfortunately suffered from some leg issues and had to wear leg braces and also often use a cane, but nevertheless, he kept growing. Sadly, one day, one leg brace was fitted improperly and ended up causing him a huge blister on his ankle, which then became infected. Tragically, the infection killed him at the age of 22 on July 15th, 1940. He was last measured June 27th, 1940 at 8 feet 11 inches, which is 272 centimeters. He was a true giant, and not only was he actually missed, but so is his Niagara Falls statue at the Guinness Book of Records Museum. I remember countless trips where I actually measured myself up against him, and that was a lot of fun. Miss you, Robbie.
Coming in at number 10, we have a giant crab. Oh, hello there, giant lurking crab. What you saying? This image went absolutely viral, and it shows a giant crab lurking off the coast of Whitstable in Kent, the United Kingdom. The crustacean appears to be the length of at least 6 boats. Excited Brits were stoked that Crabzilla appeared to be living off their shores. However, biologists in the area put the images down to being some kind of elaborate hoax. From a giant crab to a giant armadillo, up next at number 9. Researchers in the wetlands of Brazil caught some footage of a rare giant armadillo. I had no idea that giant armadillos were even a thing, but apparently so. Now apparently they can reach up to 50 kilograms in weight. Now that's over 7 times the weight of a regular armadillo. The footage was shot on an automatic trap camera, which allowed researchers a rare glimpse at the nocturnal giant. Coming in at number 8, we have a sea monster caught on Google Earth. The internet went wild in 2016 when something mysterious was spotted on Google Earth. People on Reddit were rushing to call it a kraken, and yeah, guess it kinda looks like a kraken. I don't know, maybe I imagine krakens as being a bit more tentacly, but this does look like some kind of giant fish emerging from the deep. If you can see it from Google Earth, now it has to be pretty huge. Some people are estimating that it's around 120 meters long. However, a lot of people are saying that no, this isn't proof that good old kraken is alive and well, it's just a rock, which to me is kinda sad. Oh! At number 7, we have a Dementor. I don't know whether this is a Harry Potter Dementor or some kind of terrifying sky demon, but this giant looking ghoul-like creature appeared in the clouds over the city of Kitwe in Zambia. The scary humanoid figure looked to be 100 meters long. Locals were shocked as the creature hovered over a shopping center for 30 minutes. Some people ran away in fear, others allegedly started worshipping the creature. I for one would love to have seen it for myself, so I had first-hand kind of knowledge of what was actually going on. Is this just a weird cloud formation, or like, is this Armageddon? Coming into number 6, we have a giant catfish. An Italian fisherman caught a 280-pound catfish in the Po River, and images of the monster are pretty insane. As if fish that big are just casually swimming about. A video of the man and the giant fish was posted on YouTube and received 2.3 million views. A lot of people are upset that the man killed the fish, which I totally understand, although fish are hunted and killed every day, so does it make it better if they're big or small? Now apparently this isn't even the biggest catfish on record. Back in the 1800s, an 880-pound whopper was caught. My. The deep ocean is constantly surprising us with previously undiscovered creatures, and what was caught on camera at a depth of 5,000 feet off an oil rig in Mexico totally baffled biologists. Check out number 5. The footage shot was uploaded to a YouTube channel called Disclosure TV, and it was titled Massive Unidentified Sea Monster Caught on Video Off Oil Rig. The video of the flappy sappy sea monster has had 8.7 million views and left most viewers totally baffled. Giant blobs really freak me out at the best of times, so I feel somewhat uneasy about this creature. It turns out, after some good old-fashioned research, that this giant creature is a placental jellyfish. Another creepy giant sea monster at number 4, we have a pyrosome. I don't like this one bit. Like, imagine diving, doing your thing, swimming around, GoProing around these days, when this huge, like, flobbery, sappy thing comes all flooping up in your direction. This weird cylindrical creature is called a pyrosome, and it is actually a huge clump of clones. Now, these clones are connected by tissues and move together in like a long colony. Some grow to 60 foot, so around 18 meters long, and yeah, I don't know, I don't like it. No thanks. Some more absolute nope at number 3, we have a hairy globster. So hands up if you can tell me what exactly this is. Nope, nobody? Same. I have no idea what this giant creature is and what it is doing washed up on the beaches of the Dingat Islands. Now, it washed up following an earthquake in February 2017, and nobody really knew what on earth it was, other than that it's now dead. It almost looks like the luck dragon from the Never-Ending Story, although this would be a really sad fate for it. Coming in at number 2, we have a megalodon shark. Could this be the long extinct megalodon? In June 2015, a shark diver in Mexico caught a huge shark on camera. The great white has been nicknamed Deep Blue and has been compared to the now extinct megalodon, a prehistoric shark that grew to a whopping 20 meters in length. Deep Blue is thought to be the largest great white ever seen, and I feel very nervous about watching the video of this shark dive. Finally, at number 1, we have Iceland's very own Loch Ness Monster. So, who wants to hear Rebecca try and pronounce an Icelandic word that she can't say? You guys? Okay, so meet the Lagerflorschmannen. Yep, that's right, Lagerflorschmannen. That's definitely how you say it, 100%. So this cheeky wriggler has been an Icelandic legend since 1345. In February 2012, footage of the giant serpent-like creature was caught on camera and uploaded to YouTube. It was also broadcast on mainstream Icelandic television. The creature is said to live in the icy waters of Lake Lagerfjord. It appears to be around 91 meters in length, so that's larger than a football field. I don't know, footage of this seems to be pretty legit.
Starting us off in our number 10 spot are the pyramids. Let me tell you right now, folks, that this one is just a theory with no real evidence to support it. But there are many people out there that believe one of the best pieces of evidence that we have to support the giant race is the pyramids in Egypt. Many don't believe the ancient Egyptians would have been able to build those amazing gigantic structures without the help of some sort. Some have suspected the help of aliens, and others have suspected that there was help from the ancient giant race themselves. I mean, I am a huge alien guy, so any theory that goes against my aliens hurts my soul. But nevertheless, I guess I could let the giants get some love too. But also on a more serious note, many doctors spoke out against Elon Musk when he tweeted that the pyramids were built by aliens. One doctor made it quite clear that he wasn't giving the ancient Egyptians enough credit. So maybe this giant theory is the exact same. In the end, whoever built these things, whether it be the Egyptians, which it probably is, or giants, aliens, or Bob the Builder, good freaking job, because you have stumped the human race for centuries. Coming in at our number 9 spot is an ancient cave painting found in the Sego Canyon in Utah. This piece of cave artwork is dated to be from 5000 BC, so she old. But on the right side of this piece, it is fairly safe to say that the artist drew 5 humans. On the left side, there is a large figure, and what exactly that figure is up for debate. Some believe it to be a demon rising out of the ground, some others believe it to be a terrifying creature, or maybe it is a giant. No one really knows. The humans appear to be looking up at whatever it is, but the large creature doesn't appear to have any limbs, so I'm not really sure what this painting is depicting, but whatever it is some type of gigantic being. Maybe it's a ghost of a giant. Coming in at number 8, we have Cyclops paintings. Throughout time, we have seen numerous paintings that not only depict giants, but also Cyclops. Now, what are Cyclops? Well, these guys are actually fabled and legendary creatures that were the size of giants, but only had one eye in the center of their forehead. There's been so many paintings and pieces of artwork throughout time that depict these humongous creatures that some believe there has to be some merit to it. Some depictions have the Cyclops also having a large horn that protrude out of its head, but I don't know how much more of that I can buy. If a skeleton of a large Cyclops were to be uncovered, then you would have my attention. But for now, this is just a theory based off of all of these art pieces we haven't covered throughout time. Although, speaking of skeletons, coming in at number 7, we have the West Virginia skeletons. Ever hear of Moundsville, West Virginia? Well, if you haven't, you have now. Out near this town in West Virginia, archaeologists and researchers have been unearthing massive bones and skeletons since 1774. The first one occurred when a man by the name of Jack Parsons was walking along a flooded Cheat River and found a large bone protruding out of the ground. It was then that he pulled it out and believed it to be a femur bone, which is the one in your thigh and also is the hardest bone in your body. And if you break it, it hurts. But when we measured it up to a normal human femur, this bone was 7 inches longer. Now, more bones were later found, and based off the size of what Parsons and other researchers could find, they predicted that this human being that they found would have been about 8 feet tall. Other settlers found so many more giant bones that they eventually dubbed the town Giant Town. Very creative. After that, more and more giants have been found in West Virginia, and from Moundsville to Giant Town to Wheeling, all of these are fantastic pieces, and even though they aren't Cyclops or 14-foot giant bones, they are still very impressive. Coming in at our number 6 spot is because the Greeks said so. Yeah, remember those Cyclops paintings I was telling you about? Well, most of them come from the Greeks throughout time. Giants were incredibly common throughout Greek culture, mythology, and history, but the Greeks often referred to these giant creatures as Cyclops, as I stated before. One of the most famous Cyclops being Polyphemus, who battled Odysseus in Book 9 of the Odyssey. The Greeks also believed that these giant creatures helped build some magnificent structures as well, just not over in Egypt. They believed that Cyclops were responsible for building the polygonal walls and stonework that make up most of the foundations of the Italian and Greek structures. So there's 2 parts of the world that are believed to have help from giants. Interesting. Coming in at number 5 and at our halfway point, we have because Homer says so. You know Homer Simpson? No, I'm just joshing you. I'm actually talking about the famous Greek epic poet who was born back in 750 BCE. Back in 400 BCE, Homer was quoted saying, "On the earth, there once were giants." There you have it. Do you need any more proof? Yeah, of course you do, because I do too. This is just a quote from one piece of his work, but I will say that even he is speaking in past tense. So how much further back do we have to go to find the hard proof of these beings? If they ever did truly exist, the big 15 to 30 feet ones that we all dream of, then it must have been much before anyone we know existed. Coming in at number 4, we have the hillside footprint in South Africa. Near the town of Maphutsi, located near the border of Swaziland, is the footprint of God. This 4 feet long footprint is in the side of a hill. It is believed to be anywhere from 200 million to 3 billion years old, based on the age of the granite that it is now lying in. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why the hell would a giant stomp his foot in the side of a hill? Well, whatever or whomever left this print did leave it in the ground, but because of the age of the print, the tectonic plates were actually pushed together over time and making the footprint now on the side of the hill. There's even some small markings on the toes and heel of the print that make people believe it was in motion and scuffed the mud or ground as they were in mid-stride. It is not an overly popular tourist attraction, but people have visited it from time to time, and some even leave coins in the heel of the print. Maybe as a way to pay respects to those who came before us, or maybe it's even for good luck, who knows. But this is one piece of evidence that is actually pretty cool. Whether it is a giant print or not, an Instapic alone is worth the trip. Starting us off in our top 3, at number 3 we have Hanuman's footprints. Have you ever heard of Hanuman? Well, now you have. Hanuman was the great devotee of Lord Rama mentioned in the Ramayana. While this ancient being may be long gone, evidence of his presence here on Earth is believed to be found just about everywhere in Asia, from Thailand to Sri Lanka to Malaysia, and especially in Lapakshi, Andhra Pradesh. Although in Lapakshi, many argue if it is Hanuman's footprint or the footprint of Mother Sita, based off an Indian epic called Ramayana. While there's no real proof of any of these prints or who is held accountable, many people believe them to be absolutely real. But why are there only a few footprints all around Asia, and not just the few that I have told you about? Well, it is said that Hanuman leapt from India to Sri Lanka and to other places, leaving his solo footprints everywhere. Dang! If he can jump that far with just one leap, I don't want to imagine what track and field day was like against that guy. Coming in at our number 2 spot, we have an ancient molar. So as I have stated a few times in this video, there is no real hard evidence that there were ever giants on Earth, but there is hard evidence that there were humans that were bigger than us. That being said, humans are Homo sapiens, not Gigantopithecus blacki. The Gigantopithecus blacki were actually our ape-like ancestors that came before us sapiens. These might be just the largest humanoids to ever have actually existed. Well, proven to actually exist. Lucky for all of us, we don't just have proof, we have teeth. That's right, we have a molar of one of the large beings, and let me tell you that better not be a baby tooth because it is huge. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, and if you ask me, the coolest one on this list, we have a massive giant sword. Hugh Newman, the co-author of Giants on Record, America's Hidden History, Secrets in the Mounds and the Smithsonian Files, is a firm believer in the existence of the ancient giant race. He has traveled the world studying the different ancient civilizations and evidence that leads others to believe their existence. One that is rather interesting is the subspecies of Homo sapiens that existed in Siberia around 50 to 300,000 years ago. They were called the Denisovans because they were found in the Denisova cave. They are believed to have roamed far and wide all the way to North America, so that's pretty cool. But let's get back to the sword. Newman has a picture online of him next to a 15th century giant sword found in Scotland. I just want to know, who the hell was using this thing? How could you use this thing unless you were an absolute monster? I mean, I don't know if this counts as a real piece of evidence, because maybe it was just more for decoration or a ceremonial thing, but dang. I mean, you know what? 20 bucks to whoever can properly wield that thing. I'm serious.
Number 10. Amazon tools. The Amazon rainforest is home to many unique and dangerous creatures, as well as unsolved mysteries and lost civilizations. But did you know that the Amazon was actually once home to giants? At least this evidence discovered in 2012 seems to point to that being the truth. A group of Ecuadorian researchers ventured into the thick forest in order to follow ancient legends of a city of giants, and they actually found it. They found massive stone structures and even a large pyramid, the stones being so precisely cut and arranged that it could not have been just formed by the forces of nature. Within these structures, they also found massive stone tools that were too large for any normal-sized human to use, including hammers and chisels and other building tools. While some people do still chalk it up to natural formations, the team and many others stand by their belief that this city was once home to a race of giants. Number 9. Giant skeleton. In 1890 in France, a man named Georges Vacher made a skeletal discovery in a Bronze Age cemetery in Castelnau. 3 separate bone fragments were found that came from both the arm and the leg, or humerus and tibia bones for all the scientists out there. The bones seem to date back to the Neolithic era, which was around 10,000 to 4,000 BC, and they are thought to be evidence of one of the largest human beings ever. The man who discovered them used the size of the bone fragments to estimate the total size of the person, which would have been around 11.5 feet tall. In 1892, the bones were sent to a university in France to be carefully studied by a professor of pathological anatomy, him admitting that the bones represented a quote, very tall race. A few years later, giant skulls were found in another French cemetery and also sent away for even more study. Number 8. Bigfoot. The first discovery of Sasquatch or Bigfoot footprints goes all the way back to the year 1811. Since then, there have been countless reports of Bigfoot sightings and encounters, and with the invention of photo and video cameras came massive amounts of apparent real footage of Bigfoot. Bigfoot is most often described as being a giant humanoid creature around 15 feet tall who tends to hang out in the woods and ignore fabricated mating calls from Bigfoot hunters on their television shows. These sightings also span all the way across the entire world, each country and culture having their own representation and name for the mysterious creature. From the Russian Yeti to the Australian Yowie, they're apparently everywhere. So while many photos and recordings of Bigfoot have been debunked, there are many people who truly believe the Bigfoot is real, and who's to say they couldn't potentially be a long-lost race of giants who had to move into the woods as society evolved. Number 7. West Virginia giants. The giant skeletons discovered in France aren't the only reports of giant remains being found. They have also been found in American soil, specifically in West Virginia. In 1774, a man named Jack Parsons was walking along a flooded river when he saw a bone sticking out of the ground, and like any normal person would do, he pulled it out, discovering it was a femur, but it was almost twice the size of his own. Alongside it, he found more bones and discovered a skeleton that was around 8 feet tall. In 1838, excavators found even more remains that were also much taller than the average person. In the 1850s, even more were found, though they soon went missing and were thought to have been stolen and sold. Over the years, even more remains were found in the the late 1800s, one skeleton even being over 10 feet tall. The Giant Town and other places across West Virginia have even more stories of discoveries of this race of giants. Number 6. Robert Wadlow. Arguably the most famous real giant who you've probably heard of before is a man who was named Robert Wadlow. If you have read the Guinness Book of World Records or visited one of their walkthrough museums, you have probably seen his picture or stood next to his giant life-size statue. And yes, this guy was actually real and he was actually that tall. He was just brushing 9 feet tall at the time of his death in the summer of 1940. He was born in 1918 and at the time no one knew just how tall he was going to be, as he was an average sized baby weighing 8.7 pounds, which is less than I weighed when I was born, but to be fair, I was a big baby. He then quickly started to shoot up, and by the time he was 8 years old, he was almost 6 feet tall. For reference, the average 8-year-old is usually around 4 feet tall. He became a celebrity for his height, starring in the circus and doing a promotional tour for a shoe company. Unfortunately, his gigantism led to numerous medical issues and he died at the age of only 22. Number 5. Greek mythology. Now let's turn around and take a look back at some more theoretical proof of giants. Some famous giants from different cultures and legends. I know you may not think of this as real evidence, but I just love digging into these myths and depictions, and if so many different cultures across the world are writing about giants, this could be evidence that they're real, right? So let's start with the Greeks. Atlas was the name of a titan that went to war against Olympus. As we know, the Titans lost and Atlas was cursed to hold up the sky for the rest of eternity. Atlas also had a run-in with Perseus, who was a slayer of monsters. Atlas tried to scare Perseus away, and in response, Perseus took Medusa's head out of his bag and turned Atlas to stone, creating the range that is now known as the Atlas Mountains. But hey, at least he doesn't have to hold up the sky anymore. Number 4. Irish giants. Irish mythology believes that a race of giants known as the Fomorians were actually the original settlers of Ireland. Balor was the king of these one-eyed giants and was also the god of death. It was said that anyone who looked at him would die instantly. Because of this, he constantly kept his eye closed until it was absolutely necessary. A prophecy said that he would be killed by his own grandson, so he locked his daughter away to prevent her from having any children. But this didn't work, as a minor god snuck in and got comfortable with his daughter, and they loved each other very much, and she had 3 kids. But Balor was still thinking with his head, and so he threw all 3 kids into the ocean. Problem solved, right? Wrong. One of the sons survived and was raised by the god of the sea. The kid grew up, led a bunch of Irish gods into battle, and he killed Balor by ripping out his eye. Goodbye, King of Giants, you really tried your best. Number 3. The Bible. When you think of giants in the Bible, you may think of the story of Goliath, a giant who was defeated by a regular-sized shepherd named David. Goliath was a champion from the city of Gath, which is a place where a race of giants apparently originated from. His exact size is up in the air, but many people believe he was around 9'7" and wore a large amount of bronze armor. And here's how the story goes. David goes out to face Goliath, holding the fate of his people in his hands. So of course he's armed with a very menacing weapon, a slingshot. David uses his trusty slingshot to fire a rock, which hits Goliath right between his eyes, and Goliath falls down and dies immediately. Pretty good shot. David and Goliath has become an infamous story for representing the underdog, though my personal favorite story about underdogs is the movie Underdog, released in 2007. Number 2. Gog Magog. If you know me, then you know I'm constantly looking for names to name my future children, and this one is definitely a strong contender. Gog Magog is the name of the last British giant. A Welshman wrote a book about how early Britain was inhabited by a race of giants. One of them being Gog Magog, 12 feet tall and able to easily uproot an oak tree. One day the giants attacked Brutus, descendant of the Trojans, and all the giants were killed except for good old Goggy. Brutus took Gog Magog to his second in command, who was apparently super into giant wrestling. The two wrestled and Gog Magog was going pretty ham and crushed a few of the guy's ribs, but this didn't kill the guy and instead just made him super angry. Fueled by his rage, the man was able to pick up Gog Magog, carry him up a hill, toss him off a cliff to his death, ridding the world of Britain's last giant. Rest in peace, Gog Magog. Number 1. Hrungnir. Giants exist all over Norse mythology, but the one that is known as the biggest and baddest is called Hrungnir. One day, Odin, the leader of the Norse gods of Asgard, challenged the giant to a horse race, which turns out to be a little unfair when you take into account the fact that Odin was riding his magical six-legged horse and Hrungnir just had a normal horse. He of course lost, and Odin at least felt a little bad about it, so he invited the giant back to Asgard for a drink. Like me, he couldn't handle his alcohol and started getting a little rowdy, saying that he would kill all of the gods of Asgard except for 2 goddesses, which he would bring back with him to the realm of the giants. The Asgardians were like, hey bro, that's kinda not cool, and told Thor to come deal with this clown. So the two met for battle, Hrungnir wearing stone armor and with a massive stone as his weapon. Thor picked up his magical hammer Mjolnir and it broke through both the stone and Hrungnir's face, killing him. I'm noticing a pattern in these stories that the giant always ends up dying, and probably why they're not around today.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Demon. There are many stories and alleged sightings of what is now referred to as the Black Demon of Cortez, which is said to be a massive black shark seen off of Mexico's Baja coast. One story in particular regarding this elusive shark comes from a fisherman named Eric Mack. He had reported that one day while sailing he felt his boat begin to rock, which immediately gave him the feeling something was awry. Eric was even further startled when he explained that he saw a massive, towering tail sticking at least 5 feet out of the water. The stories of this shark are so infamous that it was even the focus of an episode of a History Channel show called Monster Quest. Maybe if there's a part 2 of this video, we'll talk about some more of the sightings around the Demon. In our number 9 spot today, we have the prehistoric monster. Back in 1959, a fisherman named Tex Geddes and his friend James Gavin were boating somewhere just off of the coast of Scotland. It is said that during their time out to sea, they encountered a sea monster that neither of them had ever seen before. They described its head as being sort of turtle-shaped, and that it was a quote hellish monster of prehistoric times, and said that it was breathing heavily through a quote large red gash of a mouth. Okay, not exactly a kind description, but definitely a bit of a terrifying one. I think it's important to bring up that we actually don't really know what megalodons look like. We have a sort of idea, but at the end of the day we only have some fossils, jaws, spines, teeth. It doesn't really leave us that much to work with. While it isn't quite clear what these two men saw for sure, and it's likely that we'll never know, whatever it was definitely wasn't just the average sea creature. In our number 8 spot today, we have the TikTok shark. In May of last year, someone on TikTok called Alex Albrecht, who is a marine biodiversity student as well as a musician, shared a video on the app that had people seriously shocked. The TikTok shows a massive shark lurking around the ship that Alex was on, which is said to have been just off of the coast of Massachusetts at the time. The ship was full of research students when this massive shark made its appearance, many of which either screamed or had some sort of expletive in response. Another TikTok user asked in the comments if the shark in the video is a megalodon, considering how absolutely huge the thing was. Was this an actual megalodon? Likely not, but hey, I'm not the marine biodiversity student here, so who am I to say? In our number 7 spot today, we have snorkeling. Robert Pamperin and a friend, Gerald Lair, were snorkeling off of La Jolla Cove in California in 1959 when Robert was attacked by a shark. It is said to have all happened quite quickly, and Gerald was alerted to the distress when he heard Robert scream. Gerald turned and saw Robert unusually high in the water, and his mask was missing. At this point, Gerald dove under, and this is when he realized exactly what was going on. There was a shark that had Robert in its mouth up to his waist. Unfortunately, there really wasn't much that Gerald could do to stand up to this absolutely massive shark that he described as larger than your average great white. Robert sadly did not survive the event, and by the time rescuers arrived, they were only able to locate one of his fins. In our number 6 spot today, we have the photographer. This is an encounter that occurred just last year in November, basically a year ago. Underwater photographer Darren Verbeck was diving off of the coast of Hawaii's Big Island when he saw what he thought was a school of fish. He began to get closer, I mean the whole photographer thing, and as he got closer he started to think that what he was actually seeing was a tiger shark. He got even closer, and that's when he said, quote, "I kept looking at the head. I'm like, that is not a tiger shark." And it got closer and closer, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. Darren continued to get closer to the shark and estimated it to be over 15 feet, which is definitely quite large. He explained that the shark was not acting in a threatening way, so he continued to take his photos and shot as much as he could before the massive shark shark decided to swim away. Experts explained that the shark was likely in the area because of humpback whales, and honestly, I don't want to see the shark that could take down one of those beasts. In our number 5 spot today, we have deep blue. This shark is in fact not a megalodon, I'll just be honest about that, but it definitely is a more modern contender. Deep blue is the name of a great white shark who is most definitely one of the largest ever recorded, at least in our lifetime. This colossal monster is the largest great white shark ever caught on camera by scientists. She is measured to be 20 feet long, 8 feet high, and about 2.5 tons, and while this isn't all that huge compared to her massive prehistoric cousin, it certainly is no small feat. Rumors of her existence have been spread since as far back as the 1990s, but it wasn't until 2014 that she was officially caught on camera and documented. Researchers at the time were in the midst of studying tiger sharks, but she made her grand appearance after scavenging some food from a sperm whale carcass nearby. In our number 4 spot today, we have the USS Indianapolis. This is a story that has been considered the worst shark attack in history, which is definitely a horrific thing to think about. In 1945, the USS Indianapolis was an unescorted US warship that was sailing in the Pacific when it was struck by a Japanese torpedo. This had no problem tearing the ship in two, which then meant that 900 sailors were now floating in the ocean waiting for rescue. Over the next 5 days, nearly 600 men lost their lives due to shark attacks. That's either a group of sharks or a few very large, very hungry ones. From the survivors' accounts of what happened over the course of those days, it seemed like an absolutely nightmare situation. This is exactly why it has gone on to be called one of the worst shark attacks in history. In our number 3 spot today, we have Rodney Fox. Rodney Fox is a man who is thought of as one of the best spear fishermen in the world. In 1963, he was partaking in the Australian Spearfishing Championships, which were being held just south of Adelaide, when he went through what is widely regarded as, again, one of the worst shark attacks in history. The shark he encountered bit him around the waist, which ended up puncturing his diaphragm, ripping his lungs, and crushing his rib cage. Not only this, but the attack left his organs exposed, so much so that when he finally made it back to shore, those rescuing him had to keep his wetsuit on to ensure that his insides actually stayed on the inside. Despite the fact that Rodney needed at least 4 hours of surgery and about 400 stitches, like many people who have had these sort of terrifying encounters, rather than shying away from sharks in the water, he leaned in. He actually became an advocate for sharks after this. He created the first underwater shark observatory and helped to dispel the rumors that sharks are bad, crazy, scary animals that we should all fear. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Jersey Shore. Back in 1916, during the summer season, there were 5 different shark attacks that occurred over the span of 10 days that ended up in the deaths of 4 people. This wasn't something that had been seen before in the area, which of course left people speculating as to why this was happening. There was a heat wave in the area during the time, which likely led to more people being out, enjoying summertime sort of activities, and maybe this attracted the shark, but in the end, no one knows for sure, because no one even knows what kind of shark is responsible for the attacks in the first place. Luckily, this didn't go on to become a continuous trend, and whatever shark this was, it went on its merry way, or perhaps found another source of food, but this series of attacks definitely kept the public on edge for the weeks and months surrounding. In our number 1 spot today, we have Watson and the Shark. For this one, we are headed all the way back to 1749 with a cabin boy named Brooke Watson. Brooke was swimming in the Havana harbor when he had his encounter with a shark. This one grabbed him by his right foot and dragged him underwater. The shark got a second chomp on his foot before a rescue boat was able to come and save him. The sailor on the boat managed to get the shark to back off enough that they could get Brooke out of the water. Brooke lost his lower leg, but his life was saved, which is absolutely the most important part. Brooke's story is not over, however, as he went on to become a member of Parliament and eventually Lord Mayor of England. He was so proud of himself for not only surviving a shark attack, but then going on to earn this title that he commissioned famous artist John Singleton Copley to create a painting called Watson and the Shark, which detailed his terrifying encounter and probably went on to scare a ton of people at the time.